Welcome to the Flying Focus 21st Busiversary. I'm PC Peri, a founding member of the Flying Focus Video Collective. We started producing video as a tool for social change in 1991, when some of us came together during the so-called Gulf War, and also known as the massacre in the Middle East, which is still going on in 2012. So all this time we've been covering activist speakers, visionaries, forums, street protests, and other hard-to-find information.
And I'm Dan Handelman, and I'm also a co-founding member of Flying Focus. You may have noticed that the mainstream corporate media, which is owned by just a few companies, doesn't do a lot of analysis around war and peace, economic, environmental, or social justice. So we're here to help fill in that void. The Flying Focus Video Bus premiered on November 18, 1991. This show marks 21 years of our half-hour weekly program. Tonight, you will hear from some of our volunteer producers and videographers about the 12 shows, which are made up of 24 episodes, that we produced between November 2011 and October 2012. We'll play some short clips from these programs and explain something about the shows.
As field taping coordinator, I worked on 9 of these 12 shows. I recorded 6 and supervised 3. If you want to see something different on TV, you do it yourself. That's what we've been doing. Why don't you join us? Make it happen.
If you want to get involved, call us at 503-239-7456 or 503-321-5051, or write to us at FFVC@flyingfocus.org.
We know a lot of people are watching video on the internet, at home or on their mobile devices. You can see short clips of many of our shows online at www.flyingfocus.org.
But right now, you can hear us talking about those clips, so let's watch. So as I said a minute ago, I'm Dan Handelman, and I've been with Flying Focus since the beginning. In addition to the 5 shows I produced this year, I also helped edit 2 shows by Mike Brown, who you'll be meeting later. I produced 3 shows this year about civil rights issues, and the first one we're going to look at was taped by Jim Lockhart. And Jim's here tonight. Jim, what do you remember about that?
That particular event was stuck in my mind for quite some time because there was 4 speakers, but they each covered different aspects from different angles of the issue that was at hand.
Yeah, and Jim, you've been working with us on and off for I don't know how long. What do you think, like 15 years or something like that?
Something like that. I've been taping a variety of issues and events now since about 1995.
Great. All right, so the first show that we're going to look at is this National Lawyers Guild Forum on the show that I called Civil Liberties 2011, Can We Be Safe and Free? And it's kind of a sequel to an event that we actually taped in 2009, comparing civil liberties records of the Obama and Bush administrations. That forum was held in November of 2011, and the Occupy movement was still in full swing. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just wanted to know that what was going on with Obama. Now it was 3 years into his presidency.
And they brought out a lot of information that I thought was really pertinent to the issue, because a lot of folks weren't really aware of some of the things that they talked about because it wasn't covered on the corporate media, as you said earlier.
Exactly, and I think one of the most important things to me is that each one of the speakers talked about drones. So you're going to hear from 4 different people, and at least 2 of them bring up the issue of drones and its civil liberties. So let's take a look.
The government conveniently arrested me just days after the Abu Ghraib torture scandal broke. If you all remember some of those horrendous pictures that were coming across the tube at that time. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office, in their application for the search and arrest warrants, intentionally withheld evidence from a local federal judge that just weeks before, the Spanish police had found my fingerprint to be a negative match to the one found on the bag at the site of the Madrid bombing in March. Instead, to protect their reputation that fingerprint analysis is an infallible science, they were prepared to conceal this fact from the judge and subject me to a possible criminal indictment punishable by death.
Actually, in many ways, although the image of the United States and Obama administration appeared to be more trying to reach out to the Muslim countries and trying to build a better image in the United States, the reality is that what's happening on the ground, it's a different scenario. But for example, in the countries that originally where I come from, in Somalia, in many ways, it was in the radar, but it wasn't as engaged as current administration is doing. So right now, Somalia is one of the 6 countries that it's been targeted for drone attacks.
The issue of this, the use of drones and of international assassinations. There's been a real shift in United States foreign policy where the president now asserts an unreviewable right to kill citizens, including American citizens, far from any battlefield, away from the battlefield, based on uncertain evidence and based on secret evidence.
I've been in an unusual position and have seen some things, particularly in Guantanamo and in some of the terrorism cases, that most Americans have not had the chance to see. I felt impelled to, as some of my religious friends say, witness. I had a forum. I am a semi-public official. I'm trained to speak, so people have been throwing soapboxes at me and I've been standing on them and speaking. But all of us have the right under the First Amendment to speak. Use that right.
The second of my civil rights shows features Dr. David Adler from the University of Idaho, and he spoke at Portland State University for the 70th anniversary of the executive order that sent Japanese Americans to internment camps during World War II. This is the first time in the history of our show that this topic has gotten more than a short mention, and I think it's important since a lot of people don't even know about what happened or even learn about it in school. So he talked about the hysteria that existed after Pearl Harbor that led to neighbors turning on neighbors and the government making suspects based on racism. Dr. Adler also examined both the history of the struggle among the three branches of government when dealing with wartime issues and the modern ramifications of the internment. In this clip, he encourages people to get involved since the courts, including the Supreme Court, sometimes don't stand up for principles that the Constitution supposedly promotes.
It is the responsibility of the Supreme Court, I believe, to carry out its responsibility to check governmental abuse of power. The court failed. And indeed, what you can conclude from the Japanese internment cases is that here in this nation, we face a systemic failure. All three branches of government lost their compass. The president should never have signed the order. Congress never should have passed a statute to impose criminal penalties for violations of the executive order, and certainly the Supreme Court should not have caved in to these misrepresentations about the alleged threat by Japanese American citizens. So what this tells us is that we should be vigilant in reviewing claims and propositions advanced by governmental officials, including the military. And why does this idea come home to us today? Because we know, and in the wake of the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, that the Bush White House had dissembled, had misled the American people about military intelligence that justified the invasion of Iraq. When President Bush and the Bush administration said to the American people that Saddam Hussein was in league with Al-Qaeda in the invasion of 9/11, that was not true. When the Bush administration represented, based on intelligence information, that Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction that he intended to use against the United States, that's false as well. That claim was false as well. Why do we know this? Because within a year of making both claims, the Bush White House backed off, acknowledged there was no evidence to support either proposition. Well, what does that tell us? That maybe, just maybe, we went blindly into a war based on false propositions offered to us by the nation's highest-ranking officials. The failure to check that, the failure on the part of the American people who were swept up in the fog and the aftermath of 9/11, the failure of Congress, unwilling to challenge a popular president in these claims, marked once more a systemic failure of our Constitution.
Okay, the third show I did about civil rights was taped by Alan Evans, and PC Peri acted as the field taping coordinator. This one includes speakers on a panel called Our Streets, the Police, the Public, and the Law. It was sponsored by the Oregon State Bar, and it also was at PSU. The panelists included Ashley Albies of the National Lawyers Guild, who covered the legal aspects of free speech and free assembly, Dr. Leroy Haynes of the Albino Ministerial Alliance, who gave a historical thumbnail of the civil rights movements and nonviolence, Chief Mike Reese of the Portland Police Bureau, who said things I don't necessarily think are accurate, but I felt his opinion should be on the show for folks to decide for themselves. And Monica Garaki of the Oregon Law Center, and she talked about the frequent violation of the rights of homeless people. On the show, but not in these clips, are comments from a city attorney and a representative from the Department of Justice. The Federal Department of Justice in Portland was, at the time of the forum in April, being investigated by the DOJ. In September, they released their findings that police use excessive force, particularly when dealing with people suffering from mental illness.
You know, the other aspect of regulation of First Amendment conduct is what happens when people do engage in mass demonstrations. At some protests and mass demonstrations, there's been mass arrests, mass use of force by the police. And in a lot of these cases, people take to the streets and engage in mass demonstrations with or without a permit. And the police may issue orders to, get on the sidewalk, get off the sidewalk, trying to disperse the crowd, and then make arrests based on people not complying with those orders or attempting to comply with those orders. I think there's a very dynamic tension between the government's perceived need to maintain control of a certain situation and a citizen's perceived need for their own autonomy and their own desire to express themselves.
At the height of the civil rights movement, King wrote in a letter from the Birmingham jail a reaffirmation of his contention for direct nonviolent action for change. He stated that there are two types of laws. There are just laws and there are unjust laws. Like St. Augustine, he said, I agree, an unjust law is no law at all.
How do we as police officers balance the competing ordinances and rights of people in our community? It's tough, and I think with the occupation of Chapman and Lonsdale Park, the mayor and the Parks Commissioner and the Police Bureau took a very patient approach, and that initial occupation lasted for weeks and weeks. And at a certain point, it became untenable for that to continue. And so we gave people notice that they had to move out of the park. And then at a certain point, we had to clear the park and allow the Parks Bureau to begin the restoration process.
To the degree that society expects police to disperse and arrest homeless people for living outside, we are only making it harder for people to get off the streets. To the degree that we drive homeless people under bridges, into the woods, and into other hiding places, we only pretend that they're invisible. And to the degree anyone not homeless assumes there is a solid social safety net available if we fall on hard times, we are mistaken.
We are here with Barb Greene, and she is a producer, an editor, and we're going to talk about some of your clips that you've got ready for us tonight.
Yeah, I've been doing this with Flying Focus for about since 1995.
Wow.
And editing now a lot of the programs, especially the ones that you tape.
Mm-hmm.
And this next one is Andrea Ritchie. She's a police misconduct attorney from New York who specializes in police violence against minorities. And this is called Minority Profiling
101.
That's it. Let's take a look.
But it's this notion that if you let one broken window go unfixed or unpunished or unaddressed, that signals to the community that disorder is permissible in the community. And then literally it's just a matter of time before things progress to chaos and mayhem and anarchy in the streets in the way that they project anarchy or the way they frame anarchy, and lawlessness and violence in the streets. And so what they do is they punish the person who broke the window swiftly and harshly so that disorder can't progress. Now, it's called broken windows policing because that's the example they give, but other examples they give of sort of manifestations of disorder in communities include young people standing on a corner, namely young people of color standing on a corner, people engaged in street-based sex trade in a neighborhood, people hanging out outside after dark, people drinking outside, people engaging in public activities on the streets after dark. Those things are named as signs of disorder. Squeegee men in New York City were named as, or people who were like cleaning people's windows for money in the 80s were named as a sign of disorder, as opposed to someone providing a service. And so, and what happens is it just ends up promoting the passage of these laws and ordinances that criminalize sort of regular activities in public spaces, standing in public spaces, which is called loitering, sleeping in public spaces, which is called being homeless, or eating or drinking in public spaces, or urinating in public spaces, or certainly having sex in public, and then either enforces them, because you can't enforce those kinds of sort of very wide-sweeping laws that criminalize all manner of public behavior in public spaces across the board at all times against all people. So, if I fell asleep on the Max on the way here, looking like someone who quote-unquote belonged on that, what is it, a train, light rail thing, then no one's going to ticket me for it. But if I'm a homeless, person who sleeps on the train, or a young person sleeping on the train because they clearly have nowhere else to sleep, then they're going to get a ticket for that.
So this next program is the first of the Restorative Action projects.
Right. And that is the Restorative Action Project as opposed to the Restorative Listening Project, which was the original name.
The Restorative Listening Project on Gentrification.
That's right. And the Restorative Listening Project took the format of listening, new people in the Northeast Portland community listening to the past residents and some still residents of Northeast Portland, speaking about the grievances that they had and the sensitivities that they've come to endure with the influx of new people and pushing older residents out.
Right. A lot of harm was done to an established community here in Northeast Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the Restorative Action Project came about because people on all sides of the issue said, well, now we've heard some of the issues, let's do something about it.
Right. And so this first program is called Healing Work, and there are two people on it, Senior Pastor Don Fraser and Maceo Pettis, and they're both folks who've had a lot of experience working with interracial issues. So let's take a look at that.
Great.
I've always realized the African Americans are very verbal, very animated, whites are more reserved, don't really want to step out there and talk about this. But somehow we're supposed to create a dialogue. It's supposed to happen. And one thing that I know that has to happen in the area of race relations, people of color have to become teachers. Whites have to become learners. Why? Because I think we have the answers. And when you live in a society that it does not affect you, you walk in a privileged society, the things that I walk out in that affect me are quite different than what affects you. I want to make you aware of that because you may not think it's really happening. But if you're close enough to me where you can feel the heat in the kitchen, you'll know it's real. That's why the relationships are important. Reconciliation is a process.
As part of my work in doing the interracial dialogue trainings, I've been doing this for the last 6 or 7 years, bringing together whites and blacks and folks of other ethnic backgrounds. You find that there are people of color, not just blacks, who are afraid to even speak in a group where it's relatively safe. They're afraid to say what Don said, as was willing to say to you today. But I know they have issues. You talk to them privately, they talk about the pain, they talk about the slights, the insults, the perceived insults, the fear of sharing because maybe I'm going to get retaliation. Maybe I'm not going to be accepted. Maybe I won't be able to say it in the right way. And keep in mind that there are a host of black folks out here that are walking around saying, yeah, maybe I couldn't do that. Maybe I'm not capable. Maybe I shouldn't strive for being this or strive for being that. Reaching for the stars. There's a saying, reach for the stars, you might hit the top of the trees. But some of us don't even do that because we have a sense of unworthiness because of the messages that we've had impinged on us. How do you get at that kind of thing? Don talked about it. Kathleen talked about it. You've got to process. You've got to bring that up and you've got to talk.
Barb, we're here with another selection. What are we going to see now?
This one is Sharif Abdullah talking about inclusivity. This is the second in the Restorative Action project.
As opposed to the Restorative Listening project.
Right.
Right.
So who is Sharif Abdullah again?
Well, he is an international author, organizer of peace and observing how people work. I mean, you know, I bet you would, he's probably a sociologist, but you might consider him a social anthropologist or a cultural anthropologist in the way that he works. But he's living here these days. He did a long time ago, and then he was out in the world for many years, but he's back again. So he's bringing some of his wisdom to a local
He's
usage.
a well-known author. I read one of his books. It's really good. Yeah. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Back when I was in law school, we learned this thing that we called, this concept we called eminent domain. Eminent domain means that the government can, at any time, for any legitimate reason, take your property. They have to give you fair compensation for it. They can't take it and just say, I'm going to give you nothing, but they have to give you fair compensation for it. But there is no reason why the government can't seize, this city government can't seize every foreclosed house and put people in them. The only reason they can't do that is a lack of imagination on the part of the people in the government. I remember I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, the first time that I proposed using condemnation and eminent domain to help poor people. And I remember from the mayor, the city council, the city attorney, they're all looking at me like, what? We use eminent domain to help rich people and corporations and ourselves. The city want to put a road through your house, the road goes right through your house. But the idea of helping poor people, the idea of helping people of color, it's not that, this is to me an important part, it's not that they're racist, it's a lack of imagination. They've never, from the time that they were in elementary school, they're there to help people that look like themselves. And so it's not a matter like, oh, I don't like black people. They love black people. It's just they've never, using eminent domain to help black people, are you kidding? To help poor people, are you kidding? If it's time to build a new sports stadium, there's always money. If there's time to put in a new highway, there's always money. And as we know, if it's time to start a new war, oh my God, the money is flowing everywhere.
That does it for part one of the 21st Busiversary, the anniversary of the Flying Focus video bus. I'm PC Peri of Flying Focus. Also here in the studio tonight are Margarita, Moss, Daniel, Alan, and Tom.
And I'm Barb. If you want to get involved and or support Flying Focus in any way, which we would love, please call us at 503-239-7456 or check for show times at 503-321-5051. Or you can write to us at ffvc@flyingfocus.org. Flying Focus we're all volunteers, and our funding comes from individual donors and video orders. We can use your help, so write down those numbers and give us a call.
Portland Community Media is your perishable, precious facility. Pretty much unique in the country. Take advantage of PCM and keep the alternative voices in the mix of what gets fed into people's homes.
Thanks for watching, and tune in next week at the same time for part 2.
See you then.
Adios.